A morning view, the rich aroma of Colombian Supremo, newly brewed, unfurled through Mr. Harrison's expansive office. A daily ritual he deeply cherished. Each morning, as the city began its day below, he'd stand by his floor-to-ceiling window, a porcelain mug warming his palms, absorbing not just the coffee's invigorating steam, but the palpable triumph that infused the space. This corner office, 3 decades of relentless aspiration etched into its very foundations, bore witness to his ascent from a fresh-faced junior accountant to a pivotal division manager at Sterling and Finch. The gleam of the mahogany desk, the ergonomic embrace of the leather chair, the discreetly placed photographs of his perfectly coiffed, smiling family, all resonated with a life meticulously composed. A saga of success unfolding precisely as scripted. He took another slow draught, the dark liquid bitter embracing, an echo of the challenges already surmounted that week, and the ones he knew awaited. From this perch, 27 floors above the city's bustling arteries, the world seemed to contract, its inherent pandemonium refined into an ordered mosaic of motion and light. He often mused that this elevated perspective truly distinguished him. He perceived the grander scheme, the intricate ballet of commerce and humanity, in a way those scurrying on the sidewalks below never could. His gaze drifted downward, past the meticulously manicured rooftop garden of the opposing edifice, past the geometric grid of other office blocks, to the dynamic street scene unfolding directly beneath. It was a quintessential Tuesday morning, a symphony of urban vitality. Yellow cabs, their iconic paint dulled by exhaust and countless journeys, zipped past in a perpetual hurry. Delivery trucks, their flanks emblazoned with diverse corporate insignias, double parked with casual impunity, their drivers hustling boxes into storefronts. Pedestrians, a human current, flowed along the sidewalks, a kaleidoscope of business suits, casual wear, and the occasional brightly coloured backpack. The distant hum of traffic and the faint bleat of a car horn even managed to pierce the thick, soundproofed glass, a muted reminder of the world he governed. He watched a woman in a sensible navy suit power walk past a bus stop, her briefcase clutched tight, her expression a mask of resolve. A young couple, hand in hand, lingered by a coffee shop, their laughter a silent pantomime from this altitude. It was a captivating, ceaseless drama, enacted daily for his private viewing. Then something snagged his attention, a dissonant note in the otherwise predictable urban melody. Parked directly across the street, just beyond the ornate lamppost marking the entrance to the old bank building, was a pickup truck. It was a newer model, sleek and commanding, painted a glossy, almost intimidating shade of black. Its chrome rims glinted in the early morning sun, a stark contrast to the utilitarian vehicles that typically frequented this stretch of road. It looked expensive, out of place, almost ostentatious in its shiny perfection. But it wasn't the truck's opulent appearance that drew his focus. It was its placement. It was parked too close to the bright red fire hydrant, the universal emblem of a no parking zone. Not just proximate, but practically embracing it. The vibrant red of the hydrant seemed to shriek its warning, yet the black truck sat there with an arrogant disregard. A faint crease appeared between Mr. Harrison's eyebrows. He knew the parking enforcement officers in this district were notoriously vigilant. It was only a matter of time. He took another sip of his now cooling coffee, a faint sense of detached amusement stirring within him. Some people simply never learned. He watched for a moment longer, half expecting a driver to emerge, perhaps apologetically, perhaps defiantly. But the truck remained solitary, a silent, dark monolith against the backdrop of the busy street. A small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He had more pressing matters to attend to than the parking infractions of anonymous strangers. He turned from the window, the city shrinking once more into a distant hum, and walked back to his desk, the porcelain mug still warm in his hand, ready to begin his day. The black truck, however, lingered in his peripheral vision, a tiny, insignificant detail he would soon forget. Or so he thought. The tow truck arrives. The rhythmic hum of the city, a constant backdrop to Mr. Harrison's orchestrated life, was abruptly punctuated by a new, more aggressive growl. It started as a low thrum in the distance, a vibration that seemed to precede the sound, subtly rattling the expensive framed photos on his credenza. He paused, his gaze momentarily drawn from the intricate financial projections sprawling across his monitor. The sound intensified, growing from a distant rumble to a full-throated roar, a mechanical beast making its presence known. It wasn't a fire engine, too slow and deliberate for that urgency. Nor was it the usual cacophony of delivery trucks. This sound possessed a unique grinding quality, an almost metallic protest against the asphalt. Curious, Mr. Harrison leaned closer to his window, his brow furrowed in a slight, almost imperceptible frown. And then he saw it. A colossal tow truck, painted a utilitarian industrial yellow, lumbered into view. Its enormous hydraulic arm, usually folded neatly behind the cab, extended upwards like a metallic crane, adding to its imposing silhouette. The vehicle moved with a ponderous grace, its massive tyres devouring the street with slow, deliberate rotations. It was a machine built for one purpose: to reclaim the order of the urban landscape. A small, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at the corner of Mr. Harrison's lips. Of course, the illegally parked black truck. He'd almost forgotten about it, subsumed by the more pressing demands of his division. But the city, it seemed, had not. There was a certain satisfaction in witnessing the swift, impartial hand of justice, even for a minor infraction. Rules were rules after all, and they applied to everyone, regardless of the perceived importance of their destination or their choice of expensive transport. The tow truck, with an almost theatrical flair, executed a precise three-point turn, its backup beeper emitting a surprisingly high-pitched series of chirps that seemed incongruous with its bulk. It manoeuvred with surprising agility, pulling directly alongside the offending black pickup. The air brakes hissed, a final exhalation of mechanical effort, and the yellow behemoth settled into stillness. Officer Miller emerged from the tow truck's cab, a figure of crisp authority in his dark blue uniform. His movements were efficient, economical, no wasted motions, no hesitant glances. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen it all and was entirely unfazed by the predictable drama of impoundments. He was a cog in the machine, a vital component ensuring the smooth operation of the city's regulations. He walked around the black truck, a clipboard already in hand, his pen poised. Mr. Harrison watched as Officer Miller meticulously documented the vehicle's position. The fire hydrant a stark red sentinel beside it, the clear violation undeniable. There was no emotion on the officer's face, just a professional focus. He was merely performing his duty, an unyielding embodiment of the law. The tow truck driver, a burly man with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, dismounted from the passenger side, carrying a heavy-duty chain. The clanking of metal against metal echoed faintly, even at Mr. Harrison's elevation. a stark, almost primal sound. The driver moved with practiced ease, quickly kneeling to thread the chain through the front wheels of the black truck. Mr. Harrison found himself leaning in further, a peculiar sense of anticipation bubbling within him. It was a minor incident, certainly, but there was a certain schadenfreude in watching someone else's meticulously planned day unravel, even for something as trivial as a parking ticket. He imagined the owner of that truck, wherever they were, returning to find an empty space, the sinking realization of a costly mistake. A mental image of a frustrated, perhaps even indignant face flashed through his mind, and the smirk on his own face widened almost imperceptibly. Someone was about to have a very bad day indeed, and from his elevated vantage point, Mr. Harrison felt a fleeting sense of superiority, a confirmation of his own carefully constructed order. The world, after all, was supposed to operate according to rules, and when those rules were broken, there were consequences. This was merely a small, satisfying demonstration of that immutable truth. Officer Miller completed his paperwork, then gestured to the tow truck driver. With another hiss of hydraulics, the tow truck's arm began to descend, its powerful winch whirring to life. The chain tightened, groaning under the increasing tension. Slowly, deliberately, the front wheels of the expensive black truck lifted off the ground. The vehicle, despite its powerful engine and imposing size, was now utterly helpless, a prize caught in a mechanical trap. The sight was undeniably satisfying. A woman's plea, Anya Sharma, burst from the building's polished glass doors. The sharp click of her heels echoing briefly in the sterile lobby before she hit the sun-drenched pavement. Her smart blue suit, meticulously tailored, felt suddenly restrictive, a professional facade barely containing the rising panic within her. The midday sun, usually a welcome warmth, now seemed to mock her, glinting off the chrome of a large tow truck, positioned precisely where her black pickup had been. Her breath hitched. A knot tightened in her stomach, an icy clench that stole the air from her lungs. Her eyes, usually a calm, assessing hazel, widened, fixed on the unfolding scene with a sudden, horrifying clarity. The burly driver, a man whose posture exuded a no-nonsense efficiency, was already securing the last chain around her truck's front axle. The metallic groan of the winch starting up grated against her ears, a sound of irreversible momentum. "No, wait!" The words tore from her throat, raw and desperate, a stark contrast to her usual composed tone. She broke into a sprint, the carefully styled bun at the back of her head threatening to unravel with each frantic stride. The asphalt felt impossibly long beneath her feet, the distance between her and her truck stretching into an agonizing chasm. Officer Miller, standing a few feet away, clipboard in hand, barely registered her initial cry. He was meticulously ticking off boxes, his pen scratching a precise rhythm against the paper. He glanced up as her frantic footsteps grew louder, his expression remaining impassive, a testament to countless similar encounters. Anya skidded to a halt, hands outstretched as if to physically halt the tow truck's slow, deliberate lift. "Officer, please, you can't. My truck." She struggled to regain her breath, her chest heaving. It was only for a minute. An emergency." Officer Miller finally turned to face her fully, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in her disheveled appearance, the flush on her cheeks, the plea in her eyes. He was a man accustomed to excuses, to pleas, to the full spectrum of human desperation when faced with consequences. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, almost detached. "Ma'am, your vehicle was parked illegally in a red zone. It's clearly marked." He gestured with his pen towards a faded but undeniably red curb. I know. Anya ran a hand through her hair, exasperated. But I had no choice. There was an urgent delivery, a critical component for the new server rack. I had to get it inside immediately. The loading bay was blocked, and there was nowhere else, not even for a second. Her voice was laced with a genuine urgency, a truth she felt in her bones. She wasn't one to bend rules lightly, but this had been an absolute necessity. The tow truck driver, oblivious to the exchange, continued his work with a steady, unhurried pace. The truck was now fully lifted, its wheels dangling uselessly above the ground. Ma'am, ignorance of the law, or even necessity, is not a valid defense against a parking violation, Officer Miller stated, his tone unwavering. The process has begun. Once the vehicle is hooked, it's going to the impound lot. Anya's shoulders slumped, a wave of defeat washing over her. She knew the rules. She lived by them, in fact. But this felt different, a harsh imposition on a genuine crisis. Her eyes, still wide with a lingering hope, scanned the officer's face, searching for any flicker of understanding, any hint of compassion. There was none, only professional resolve. Please, Officer Miller, she tried again, her voice softer this time, edged with a quiet desperation. Is there anything at all you can do? I'll move it right now. I'll pay the fine on the spot. I need that truck. There are things in there that are essential for my project, things I can't afford to lose or even delay access to. He shook his head slowly, his gaze steady. I've already initiated the tow request, ma'am. My hands are tied. You'll need to retrieve it from the municipal impound lot. The address is on the citation. He extended the clipboard towards her. Its white paper, a stark symbol of her predicament. Anya stared at the form, then at her truck, now slowly being pulled forward by the tow vehicle. The sight was a punch to her gut. All her careful planning, all her meticulous organisation, undone by a single, desperate moment of necessity. She felt a surge of frustration, not just at the situation, but at the unyielding rigidity of the system. She prided herself on being adaptable, on finding solutions. But here, in the face of this unfeeling process, she felt utterly powerless. She took the citation, her fingers trembling slightly. The ink on the paper felt cold against her skin. This was not just an inconvenience. It was a disruption, a challenge to her very competence, and she knew, with a sinking certainty, that this would have ripple effects far beyond a mere parking ticket. Rules are rules. It's too late, ma'am. Officer Miller's voice, a monotone drone, cut through the frantic thrum of Anya's pulse. His head, framed by the dark brim of his patrol hat, shook slowly, a deliberate motion that seemed to punctuate the finality of his words. The tow truck driver, a hulking figure with a greasy beard and an almost imperceptible smirk, had already secured the chains around her truck's axles. The heavy groan of the winch echoed in the suddenly silent street. Each click a hammer blow against Anya's fading hope. Too late? Anya's voice, usually so controlled, cracked. She felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp, replace the initial heat of her desperation. Officer, please, it's literally just been hooked up. You can see it. It hasn't even moved an inch. This project, it's critical. I have to get these samples inside. She gestured wildly towards the pristine glass facade of the pharmaceutical company. The building looming like an indifferent monument to her impending failure. The reflective surface threw back her own distorted image. A woman on the verge of unravelling. A sight she rarely, if ever, allowed herself to contemplate. Officer Miller merely sighed, a practiced, almost bored sound. His gaze, unblinking, swept over her, then to the truck, then back to her, as if confirming the obvious. "Ma'am, the vehicle is attached. That constitutes active towing, and you are parked in a clearly marked red zone." His finger pointed to the faded, almost rust-coloured curb, a silent accuser. "The signs are posted every 50 feet along this block. No stopping, standing, or parking, any time." He reached into the breast pocket of his uniform, pulling out a small, handheld device. The whir of its internal printer was a cruel counterpoint to the city's distant hum. Anya watched, a cold dread seeping into her bones, as a slip of paper emerged, crisp and official. The fluorescent glow of the device illuminated his impassive features, highlighting the faint lines around his eyes that had undoubtedly seen countless variations of her exact plea. He tore the ticket free with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Here you go, Mom." He extended the ticket, a small rectangle of paper that felt disproportionately heavy in Anya's trembling hand. The numbers on it swam before her eyes, a dizzying array of fines and penalties. "You'll need to contact the impound lot within 24 hours to retrieve your vehicle. The address is on the back, and the fine for the infraction is also listed." Anya stared at the ticket, then at the officer, then back at her truck, now visibly lifting off the ground, its rear wheels dangling uselessly. The sheer injustice of it, the unyielding rigidity of the rules, choked her. "But I was only going to be a minute. It's an emergency delivery. These samples are time sensitive. This isn't just about a parking ticket, officer. This is about a project that could affect thousands of people." Her voice rose, a desperate raw plea that she immediately regretted, knowing it would only harden his resolve. Officer Miller, however, remained unmoved. He had heard it all before. The emergencies, the critical deliveries, the dying relatives, the forgotten appointments. Every excuse, every sob story, every desperate plea for leniency melted into the same indistinguishable background noise. His job was to enforce the rules, and the rules, in his experience, were rarely flexible, especially not for a black pickup truck in a red zone. He simply shook his head again, a gesture of weary finality. "Rules are rules, ma'am. Everyone has to follow them." He then turned, his attention already shifting to the next potential infraction, leaving Anya standing alone on the curb, the ticket burning in her hand. From the fifth-floor window of the pharmaceutical company, Mr. Harrison observed the unfolding drama with a detached interest. He took a slow sip of his expensive Colombian roast, the rich aroma filling his pristine office. The tiny figures below, a woman in a smart business suit, a police officer, and a tow truck driver, moved with an almost theatrical urgency. He could just make out the dark shape of the pickup truck as it was hoisted onto the tow bed. Mr. Harrison, a man who prided himself on order and adherence to protocol, felt a familiar satisfaction bloom within him. "Rules are rules," he murmured to himself, the phrase a comforting mantra. He'd seen countless people try to bend them, break them, or simply ignore them, only to be caught in the inevitable gears of the system. This woman, whoever she was no different. There was a certain elegant justice in watching the consequences unfold. He had no patience for people who thought they were above the regulations, especially not in a city that thrived on structure. He turned from the window, a faint smile playing on his lips, and returned to his meticulously organized desk. His world, unlike the street below, was perfectly in order. A sad departure. The digital clock on the impound office counter glowed an unforgiving 11:37 a.m. Anya stared at the number, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. "That'll be $250, miss," the clerk said, his voice flat, devoid of empathy. He was a man built like a sturdy oak, with a face that seemed perpetually etched into a grimace. Anya fumbled in her purse, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled out her credit card. The amount felt like a punch to the gut, not just for the money, but for what it represented. The absolute unyielding power of the system over her carefully constructed plans. "And the truck will be released in, say, an hour, once the tow company processes the paperwork," the clerk added, pushing the receipt across the counter. Anya snatched it, the flimsy paper feeling heavy in her hand. An hour she didn't have. The samples, the delicate ecosystem of her research, were ticking away, their viability dwindling with every passing minute of warmth. The image of the carefully labelled vials, nestled in their temperature-controlled cooler, flashed in her mind, a stark reminder of the escalating crisis. She walked out of the sterile, air-conditioned office into the humid embrace of the late morning. The sun, previously a distant glow, now beat down with an oppressive intensity, mirroring the heat building within her. The street, usually bustling with a predictable rhythm, seemed to mock her with its normalcy. People walked by, lost in their own worlds, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding around her. And then she saw it. Her shiny black pickup truck, a beacon of her independence and the mobile hub of her scientific endeavours, was being manoeuvred onto the flatbed of a tow truck. The sight sent a fresh wave of despair washing over her. The tow operator, a burly man in a grease-stained uniform, gestured with practiced ease, directing the truck with an almost casual indifference. The chains clinked, the winch whirred, and with a final hydraulic hiss, her truck was secured. Anya felt a choked cry rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Public displays of emotion wouldn't change anything. She stood rooted to the spot, watching as her research vessel, her laboratory on wheels, was slowly, inexorably lifted off the ground. The black paint, usually reflecting the sky with a mirror-like sheen, now seemed dull and lifeless, mirroring her own deflated spirit. Each upward movement of the truck felt like a downward pull on her own hopes. She watched, her gaze fixed, as the tow truck, with her precious cargo in tow, began to pull away. The engine rumbled, a low guttural sound that vibrated through the pavement and up into her feet. The truck moved slowly at first, then picked up speed, turning the corner at the end of the street. For a fleeting moment, she saw the glint of sunlight off its rear bumper, a final mocking farewell. Then, it was gone, swallowed by the urban landscape, leaving behind only the lingering scent of exhaust fumes and the heavy silence of her own disappointment. A long, ragged sigh escaped her lips, carrying with it the weight of her frustration and the growing anxiety about her samples. Her shoulders slumped, and she ran a hand through her hair, pushing back a stray strand that had escaped its tie. The heat, the noise of the city, the relentless march of time, it all pressed in on her, making her feel small and insignificant. Turning slowly, Anya looked back at the imposing facade of the research building. It loomed large and indifferent, a monument to the very science she was struggling to uphold. Her steps were heavy, each one an effort, as she made her way back towards the entrance. The automatic doors hissed open, welcoming her back into the cool, sterile air, a stark contrast to the burning inferno of her current predicament. She walked down the familiar corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting long, impersonal shadows. She was oblivious, however, to the intricate web of consequences already beginning to unravel. A consequence of the very rules she had just fallen victim to. Unbeknownst to her, a twist of fate, woven by the threads of strict adherence and unforeseen impact, was already tightening its grip on the very institution she now re-entered, threatening to entangle even the rigid Mr. Harrison in its unfolding drama. The big meeting trouble. The scent of stale coffee and apprehension hung heavy in Conference Room B, a stark contrast to the crisp autumn air outside. 60 minutes had elapsed since Mr. Harrison's self-satisfied glance at the departing tow truck, and now the meticulously ordered world he so cherished felt distinctly off-kilter. He sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his gaze sweeping over the anxious faces of his division heads. The usual hum of productivity had been replaced by a nervous quiet, punctuated only by the soft whir of the projector, displaying a single, ominous slide. Project Nightingale. Status critical. Sarah Chen, her usually bright eyes shadowed with worry, chewed thoughtfully on the end of her pen. As the lead on Project Nightingale's data analysis, she was intimately familiar with the intricate web of delays and complications that had begun to entangle their most ambitious undertaking. She had tried to raise alarms weeks ago, but her concerns had been met with Mr. Harrison's characteristic dismissal of anything that threatened his carefully constructed illusion of control. Now, the chickens, as her grandmother would say, were coming home to roost. "All right, people," Mr. Harrison began, his voice attempting a firm composure that didn't quite mask the underlying strain. "Let's get straight to it. Nightingale, what's the latest?" He looked expectantly at Mark Jenkins, the project manager, whose usually jovial demeanour had been replaced by a grim set to his jaw. Mark cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Sir, as you know, we've hit a significant roadblock with the cellular integration module. The proprietary software from our external vendor, Apex Innovations, isn't interfacing correctly with our primary system. It's causing data corruption and instability." A low murmur rippled around the table. Sarah noted the way Mr. Harrison's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. "And the timeline for resolution?" he pressed, a hint of steel entering his tone. Mark hesitated, glancing at Sarah. She met his gaze, offering a subtle nod of encouragement. "Apex has informed us they need a minimum of 2 additional weeks for debugging and patch deployment," Mark continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "And that's optimistic, assuming no further complications." A collective sigh escaped the team. 2 weeks. That wasn't just a delay, it was a disaster. Project Nightingale was already behind schedule, its success crucial to the institution's upcoming funding review. 2 weeks, Mr. Harrison's voice was now sharp, laced with an incredulity that bordered on anger. "This is unacceptable, Jenkins. Absolutely unacceptable. We cannot afford this." The CEO specifically emphasized the critical nature of this project just last month. As if on cue, the heavy oak door to Conference Room B swung open, and Mr. Henderson, the institution's executive vice president, strode in. His presence alone was enough to silence the room, but it was his expression, a thundercloud of frustration and concern, that truly ratcheted up the tension. He wasn't one for dramatics, so his current demeanour spoke volumes. Mr. Harrison, visibly flustered by the unexpected interruption, stammered, "Mr. Henderson, sir, we were just discussing." Henderson cut him off with a terse wave of his hand. His gaze swept over the worried faces, lingering for a moment on Sarah, before settling on Mr. Harrison. "I've just come from an unscheduled meeting with Ms. Albright," he announced, his voice low and gravelly, like stones grinding together. "She's not pleased at all." A cold dread settled over the room. Ms. Albright was the new CEO, a formidable figure known for her no-nonsense approach and her uncompromising expectations. She had only been in office for a month, but her reputation for efficiency and results had already preceded her. "Project Nightingale, Mr. Harrison," Henderson continued, his voice gaining an edge. "It's a linchpin. The board, the investors, everyone is watching this, and I've just been informed that our key cellular integration module is effectively non-functional, pushing our timeline back by at least 2 weeks." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "Ms. Albright is exceptionally disappointed. She's viewing this as a significant lapse in oversight and execution." Mr. Harrison's face, usually so composed, paled noticeably. He opened his mouth to protest, but Henderson held up a hand. "More to the point," Henderson pressed on, his eyes narrowed. "Ms. Albright will be addressing the division personally, here, in this very room, in 20 minutes. She wants a full explanation, and more importantly, a viable solution plan. She's not just unhappy, Mr. Harrison. She's coming to fix it." The words hung in the air, a hammer blow to Mr. Harrison's meticulously ordered world. The rigid structure he had so carefully maintained, the rules he so stringently enforced, were now crumbling under the weight of an unforeseen crisis. Sarah watched him, a mix of grim satisfaction and genuine concern churning within her. This wasn't just about Project Nightingale anymore. It was about the very foundation of their division, and perhaps the careers of everyone in the room. The unintended consequences, she knew, had just begun. The CEO's grand entrance. The silence that followed Henderson's pronouncement was a dense, suffocating blanket. 20 minutes until Ms. Albright, the formidable new CEO, descended upon them, demanding answers Harrison didn't possess, and solutions that seemed to materialize from thin air. The air in the conference room crackled with an unspoken dread, each tick of the ornate wall clock amplifying the pressure. Sarah Chen, usually composed, now gripped her pen so tightly her knuckles were white, her gaze flicking between Harrison's ashen face and the menacing blank screen where Project Nightingale's failure mocked them. 20 minutes, Henderson repeated, his voice devoid of sympathy. That's all you have to prepare a preliminary explanation for Ms. Albright. She expects clarity, Mr. Harrison, and she expects solutions, immediate ones. Harrison felt a cold sweat prickle his hairline. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His well-ordered world, the one he had meticulously constructed over decades, was dissolving into chaos. He glanced at Sarah, a silent plea in his eyes, but she merely offered a tight, sympathetic smile that did little to assuage his growing panic. Her earlier warnings, dismissed with a wave of his hand, now echoed in his mind, a haunting chorus of, "I told you so." The 20 minutes evaporated like mist in a scorching sun. Each second was a hammer blow against Harrison's rapidly crumbling composure. He tried to construct a coherent narrative, a plausible excuse, anything to mitigate the impending wrath of the new CEO. His mind, however, kept returning to the image of the black pickup truck being hoisted onto the towbed, a satisfying affirmation of order. The thought, once a source of smug contentment, now felt distant, irrelevant in the face of this immediate, catastrophic threat. A sudden sharp knock on the conference room door jolted everyone. Henderson straightened, his usually relaxed posture now rigid with anticipation. Harrison's stomach lurched. This was it, the moment of reckoning. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. "She's here," Henderson announced, his voice a low rumble. The door, a heavy oak panel, began to open, slowly, deliberately. Each inch it revealed felt like a year. Harrison's gaze was fixed on the widening gap, his heart thudding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He braced himself, picturing a stern, unsmiling woman in a power suit, her eyes sharp and unforgiving. He imagined a presence that would instantly command the room, radiating an aura of absolute authority. First, a hand appeared, slender fingers resting lightly on the doorframe. Then, an arm clad in the sleeve of a dark, tailored blazer. Harrison held his breath, a knot of dread tightening in his chest. He could feel Sarah Chen's tension beside him, a palpable wave of anxiety emanating from her. As the door swung fully open, Harrison's carefully constructed expectations shattered into a million pieces. The woman who stepped into the room was not the corporate titan he had envisioned. She was not the imposing figure he had mentally prepared for. She was Anya Sharma. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Harrison's jaw dropped, a silent chasm opening in his face. His mind, still reeling from the Project Nightingale disaster, struggled to reconcile the image before him with the woman he had witnessed earlier that morning. The woman whose black pickup truck he had watched with such detached satisfaction as it was towed away. The woman who had pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation, about critical scientific work. Anya Sharma stood in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes, though currently focused and professional, held a faint echo of the frantic urgency he'd seen earlier. She wore a simple, elegant blazer over a crisp white blouse. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her, a ghost of the morning's frantic energy. Her gaze swept across the room, acknowledging Henderson with a brief, curt nod, before settling on the assembled division managers. Her eyes, cool and analytical, lingered for a fraction of a second on Harrison. There was no recognition in them, no hint that she remembered him, or perhaps she simply chose not to show it. Sarah Chen beside Harrison gasped softly, a tiny, almost inaudible sound that only he seemed to register. Her eyes, wide with shock, flickered between Anya Sharma and Harrison's utterly stunned face. The realization dawned on her almost simultaneously with Harrison. The rigid division manager, who had so gleefully enforced a petty rule, had just orchestrated the towing of his new CEO's vehicle. The silence that descended upon the room was absolute, punctuated only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Harrison felt a cold dread creep up his spine, a far more potent fear than any corporate reprimand could inspire. His carefully ordered world hadn't just crumbled. It had been utterly, spectacularly demolished by his own hand. A stern review, Anya Sharma's gaze swept across the polished conference table, lingering for a fraction of a second on each anxious face. The air, already thick with unspoken fear, seemed to grow heavier under her silent scrutiny. Then, her eyes, the colour of stormy skies, settled on Mr. Harrison. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through him. It wasn't a jolt of recognition on his part. Rather, it was the chilling certainty that she recognized him. The memory, vivid and unwelcome, flashed in her mind. The man in the window, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips as a black pickup was hoisted onto the tow truck. The crisp white shirt, the perfectly knotted tie, the air of self-satisfaction that had so infuriated her. He hadn't changed. The same rigid posture, the same thin lips set to his mouth, though now etched with a new, unwelcome strain. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. Harrison, for his part, felt a cold dread seep into his bones. It was in the way her eyes held his for just a beat too long, in the almost imperceptible narrowing of them. He swallowed, a dry, raspy sound in the sudden silence of the room. He told himself it was impossible, a trick of the light, a figment of his overstressed imagination. But the insistent thrumming of his pulse told a different story. Sarah Chen, seated beside Harrison, observed the silent exchange with a growing sense of alarm and morbid fascination. She saw the flash of something in Ms. Sharma's eyes, a flicker of memory, perhaps, quickly masked by professional composure. Then she glanced at Harrison, whose face had paled to an ashen grey. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The black pickup, the self-satisfied grin, the hurried phone call he'd made to the tow company. Sarah felt a shiver of dread for her colleague, mixed with a strange, undeniable sense of poetic justice. Anya broke the silence, her voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Good morning, everyone." The words, simple as they were, resonated with an undeniable authority. "I've had a chance to review the initial reports for Project Nightingale." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "And I must say, I am profoundly disappointed." The collective gasp was almost inaudible, yet it vibrated through the room. Harrison felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had hoped for a reprieve, a chance to explain, to deflect, but Ms. Sharma was wasting no time. "The data presented," she continued, her gaze sweeping the room once more, though it seemed to pause imperceptibly longer on Harrison, "indicates a significant deviation from projected outcomes. The core objectives, as outlined in the initial proposal, appear to be woefully unmet." Her tone remained even, almost conversational, yet each word landed with the force of a hammer blow. "We are not just talking about minor setbacks here. We are looking at a fundamental failure to achieve critical milestones." She picked up a slim tablet from the table, her fingers moving with quiet precision across its surface. "The projected cost overruns are alarming. The timelines, frankly, are a shambles, and the promised innovative solutions, they are nowhere to be found in these reports." Harrison felt a trickle of sweat run down his spine. He tried to compose himself, to formulate a response, but his mind felt like a tangled mess. He had prepared for a grilling, certainly, but not this surgical precision, this calm, unyielding dissection of his division's failings. "This project," Anya stated, her voice still unwavering, "was presented as a flagship initiative, a cornerstone for the company's future growth in this sector. Yet, what I see before me is a project teetering on the brink of complete collapse." She finally looked directly at Harrison, her eyes piercing. "Mr. Harrison, as the division manager overseeing Project Nightingale, I expect answers. Comprehensive, immediate, and without equivocation." Her posture was regal, her expression unreadable, yet the intensity in her gaze was unmistakable. "Why has this project, under your leadership, fallen so spectacularly short of expectations?" The question hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. Harrison's mouth opened, then closed again. The carefully constructed excuses, the blame he had hoped to shift, all evaporated under the unwavering scrutiny of the new CEO. He was trapped, not just by the failing project, but by a past oversight, a minor act of bureaucratic satisfaction that now loomed like a colossal shadow over his entire career. Sarah Chen watched, a silent witness to the unfolding catastrophe, feeling a chill despite the warmth of the room. The game was over, and Mr. Harrison had just lost in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. begging for a chance. Harrison's throat was a desert, each swallow a rasp against parched tissue. The words caught, tangled, and died before reaching his lips. He could feel the blood draining from his face, a cold tide receding to leave behind a hollow shell. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, pierced through him, stripping away his composure layer by layer. There was no mistaking the glint in her eyes, the subtle tightening of her jaw. Anya Sharma knew exactly who he was. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, stealing his breath, rendering him speechless and utterly exposed. The past, a seemingly insignificant act of bureaucratic muscle flexing, had returned with a vengeance, embodied in the woman now holding his entire future in her hands. A sickening lurch churned in his stomach. He felt a tremor begin in his knees, threatening to buckle him. This wasn't just about Project Nightingale anymore. It was personal, and he was the target. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the nervous shuffling of feet from the other team members. Harrison's mind raced, frantically searching for an explanation, an apology, anything that might diffuse the explosive tension. But his thoughts were a chaotic scramble. The very air in the room seemed to crackle with unspoken accusation. It was Sarah Chen who finally broke the spell.